Hello, everyone. My name is Jen, and welcome to the Book Refuge, and welcome to week 13 of 2022 and my weekly wrap up. So, this week is very exciting. We've started April, which is awesome. I got to read a anticipated read. I also was reading some fanfic, so we have some interesting fanfics to talk about, and yeah, it's exciting. So first off, I want to welcome some new channel members to the Book Refuge, which always just makes me so happy. We have Becky, who joined at the Romantic Renegade level. Thank you, Becky. Welcome to the fam. And then we have Tasha, who joined at the Faded Friend level, which is awesome. So yeah, if you ladies aren't in the Discord, make sure you join and then give me a message so I can give you access there if you want to. Everything that you get in my channel memberships you can get from the YouTube community tab, but the Discord is fun because we have some behind the scenes chat and some cool stuff there. So definitely do that. So now we need to talk about the books that I read during the last couple days of March and then what I read for April. I did just put up my March reading wrap up the other day, so definitely check that out if you want to know what my stats were for March and what my favorite books were. There was some great ones. March was a really good month. So let's go ahead. I have a fanfic to start with. Sorry, I got my notes here. I didn't bring my little table over, so I have to look down a little bit. I read The Erised Effect by Ada P. Ricks, and this is one that I've had on my TBR for a little bit because it is like an erotic kind of shorter tale. It's a Dramini one, and this one actually has a lot of the characters in it, and Hermione and Pansy actually work together, and Pansy has created this new potion that is supposed to share people's desires when you look in the mirror together. I don't know. To be honest, I wasn't completely sure what was happening. I just know that we went through literally everyone else's desires before we got to Hermione and Draco, and I was getting a little bit bored by that fact. I mean, yes, there was lots of different sexy times between all these different couples, but for me, I was here for Hermione and Draco, not for everybody else's kinks, and not necessarily kinky. Some of them were, but I just wanted to get to the point there. So this one, I gave it a 3.5 star. Once we finally got to their stuff, it was good. It was a 4.5 on the spice scale because this was basically all smut. So definitely not awful. And it was a kind of an interesting setup. I was just meh, not my favorite thing. Then I read God's Eye by Susan Finetti, and this was one of my favorite books in March. So I definitely talk in depth about this one in my monthly wrap-up. But this is a Viking historical romance, and it's probably the best one I've ever read. I get requests all the time from me for Viking romance recommendations, and I always have to tell people that I don't have any to recommend. I have read some, and I have not liked them. Notoriously, North of the Stars by Monica James, I hated so much. And I have read some Viking historicals that, I read when I was young, and I just don't remember them well enough to recommend them now. I want to be careful what I'm recommending to people. But this book I saw on Pam Godwin's Instagram. She had shared that it was an amazing romance, and I was I'm here for it. So this book is about Brenna, who is called Brenna the God's Eye because she was born with an eye that is different from the other one, and everyone says that she's touched by Odin, and so she is teased and kind of made fun of, and really she's an outcast all of her life. But when she's young, she stops this young boy from getting his tongue cut out by his father. And this boy who's the same age as her, he is scared of her too, but he is able to get away from his father. And then we skip ahead a few years, and now Brenna is a shield maiden, and she works with this one laird, or whatever they would call it. They wouldn't call it a laird, but there's a warlord that she works with, and her clan, her group, they end up working with another Viking group that sometimes they're at war with and sometimes they work with them. and they happen to be working with them this time. And it turns out that that little boy that she helped is now this hunky Viking man, and his name is Vali, and he obviously recognizes her, and he's heard of her, and he knows that this is the same woman who had helped him, and he wants her, and he goes about pursuing her. And Brenna, she is very innocent in like the ways of like intimacy. Obviously she knows what sex is, but like she is a virgin in this because nobody has been like willing to make any moves on her because of her being touched by Odin supposedly and everything. So it's a very interesting setup, but Vali is one of the most romantic like heroes ever. Like the way he pursues her and the way that he just knows that they are meant to be like was so powerful. So this book does go over a large amount of time. They do get together relatively soon in the story, but there's a lot that they go through. So there is quite a few trigger warnings for this, including there is mention of rape. That not to our main character at the time. There is an attempted assault on her at a different time. We see tortury. There's torture, slavery, and there's loss of a child / a pregnancy in a pretty like brutal way. So I want to share that. So this was very brutal. It is a Viking romance, but the romance is completely consensual and absolutely beautiful. And there's a lot of Vali having to like show Brenna, like she's never had intimacy. She's never had physical touch with anyone. And you know that that stuff is my crack. That is my shit when someone has never been like treated that way and then they find someone who gives it to them. I love it. So I gave this one 4.5 stars, which I'd rounded up to 5, and it has a 3 on the spice rating. The sex is in there quite often. It just isn't like overly erotic sex. But it was in there quite consistently, and there was some great like pregnancy sex at times, and it was just fun. It was fun. So then I read The Invitation. This was a fanfic. This is by Hot Elf, and this one was a triad. So this was Hermione and Harry are actually in a relationship. They're dating. And they've been dating for a while, and Draco, he actually invites them to his house, and they have a like threesome that night, and then they actually become they become a triad where they're like all dating each other. And there are scenes where they're together too, so I really like that. This was an MMF, but they did like make a point that Harry and Draco have a relationship, and Draco and Hermione have one, and Hermione and Harry have one, and that's what I love. You know that I love it when everybody's important to each other. So I really, really enjoyed it. It was like a pretty quick one, and it didn't go into as much of the details that I wanted. It pretty much was just smut. But even though it was just like erotic smut, it was also like I felt like their relationship, they were building those relationships. It wasn't just like we're both about Hermione or we're both about whatever. Like they were all about each other. So I gave this one a 4-star, and it was 4 on the spice scale. Then I completed the Bailey Brothers series, which you know I've read books 3 through 6, but I hadn't actually read the first 2 books in this series. So I'll probably talk about these together, even though this one was in my March wrap up, and then this one is in April, because this was the last book that I read for my March books. I had gotten the audiobooks during the Audible sale because I love Claire's audiobooks. And this one has Aaron Shedlock is the male anyway. But these 2, it starts with this novella, which is about Asher and Grace. And so Grace is actually a Miles, which if you've read the Miles series first, like you'll know. And she's been friends with Asher and the Baileys like her whole life. Graham and Granddad actually really like helped raise her because she didn't have a single mom, but if you know like her dad was actually very absent, and that's because he had an entire other family. So there's Grace, and then she has a brother who is like quite a bit younger than her, who was kind of an accident baby to them. But what happens in this book is that they've been friends, and Asher decides to finally pursue something with Grace. And so it begins this like friends to lovers. Spoiler alert, there's something tragic that happens to their relationship. And then I will just say, let me see what I rated that real quick. So I rated this 4 stars because it was a great novella, great start to it. And this one doesn't really have much smut at all because it's the beginning of them. So it has a 1.5. Then Fighting for Us picks up 7 years later. And Asher is coming back into Grace's life. He doesn't feel like he is now worthy of Grace anymore. He doesn't feel like he's worthy of any relationship. He has a bit of PTSD from where he was. And, you know, his brothers and his family are trying to help him, you know, deal with that. And Grace, you know, she's waited all this time for him to be back. And, you know, she's a bit frustrated that he is just so willing to like shut her out. So this one I also gave 4 stars, but this one had a 3.5 on the spice scale because they do a lot more naughty things in this one. So I was just happy to read those 2. I'm glad that I got the audiobooks to round out the Bailey Brothers series because it was wonderful. So then I had a DNF actually, which I had been working on this book for like a month and a half. I'd been slowly picking away at this book, and I finally just decided, like I tried reading another 100 pages of it, and then I finally decided just to DNF it. And that unfortunately is My Midnight Moonlight Valentine by J.J. McAvoy. So I loved the setup of this, and I'd actually heard, I forgot what her channel name is, but one of the channels I watched, this book was one of her favorite books of 2021. And I was super interested because I love vampire books. I still have an incredible soft spot for them. And I love reading them. And this setup, like this is an interracial couple. This is a very old vampire who he has lost his memory, and he wakes up naked in the woods after having murdered these like witches who had been maybe doing something to him. We don't know. And our heroine is also a vampire, but she's a very young one, and she comes upon him and he instantly knows that she's his mate, even though he doesn't remember how he got where he is or anything that's happened in the last, I think, couple years, but he sees her and knows she's his mate, and she wants nothing to do with that. But he like won't kind of leave her alone and like convinces her to like come with him to help him find his memory and all that. So Druella and Theseus are their names. But I made it a good 60% into this book, and 2 things were happening. Number 1, there was a fuck ton of characters who got introduced. Like I could not keep them straight. There was so many of them. Part of that is because there was long spaces in between when I was reading it because I was bored, and there was a no spice up to 60% into this book. Just a couple fantasy scenes where she's imagining him doing something to her. So I was out. You can't bait me for 60% and confuse me and be all those things. So I was out. I gave it 60%. So I DNF'd this one, and I was freaking bored. It's literally what I put in my notes. So there we go. Okay, then I read this little trilogy, which I'm going to talk about all as one thing. And it was the Crash trilogy by Drew Jordan. So Crash, here's this cute little story about this. So Crash is one of the freebies that I had on my Kindle, and I'm getting things ready for the Mafia Romance Readathon. I was going through my Kindle all the way back to the beginning to see what Mafia books I have left unread. If you check out my Instagram, you'll know that the next Mafia Romance Readathon is going to be May 5th through the 8th. I'll have more about that on my channel soon. But anyway, I was going through and finding all of my unread Mafia. And there was this one called Crash, which looked like it was a Mafia from the cover. So I looked at it and I was like, oh, this isn't that. It's a survival book, which, you know, last year I went through a phase where I read like 15 survival romances, you know, because that's what happened. And this was one that was a freebie. And I was like, oh, cool. And it's like a short novel. So I just decided to read it. And it's about this girl named Lainey who she's on her way to Alaska to stay with a friend for like a month or a couple weeks. She's had a lot of crazy things happen in her life, and we don't know about all of those when it starts. We just know that she's woken up, the plane has crashed. She gets rescued by this stranger in the woods, and the pilot and the other passenger are both dead. And so he takes her to his cabin, and he won't tell her what his name is. He's like, you can call me whatever you want. And it's clear from the beginning they're very attracted to each other, but he's like helping heal her. And he's like, we can't make it to town right now because we can't get across the river. As soon as we can, I'll take you to town. So for like a few weeks, she's just staying with him in his cabin, and he's very mysterious. He's got a very commanding presence, and she's extremely attracted to him, and he's attracted to her. And one thing leads to another, and they're getting a little bit kinky together is the thing. So like I said, there's 3 books in this little trilogy. You can buy it as one book, basically, because all 3 books are 500 pages, so it's like a novella series. So there's Crash, Hide, and Expose. And very quickly, this survival story turns into he doesn't want to let her go. So it becomes a captor-captive situation. And that's all I'll say, because this one definitely had thriller elements. When we slowly piece together parts of the stranger's past, we also get revealed more things about Lainey and how she ended up here, and maybe why she's willing to be someone's captive, and things like that. So overall, I gave the first one 4 stars because I was very entranced by it. But then I gave 2 and 3, 3.5 stars. They were all a 4 on the spice scale because he's very dominant. There's lots of kinky things. There is some dubious consent, but it's mostly all like consent because she's really into a lot of what he's doing. So then I have one more fanfic to talk about that I read, and this one is called 77 Wishes by Burning Cherries, and this was my first completely just Drarry fanfic. So this is a Draco and Harry fanfic, and it starts with Harry, who he's bisexual. He goes to a gay bar and picks up a guy, and they go home and they are both wearing glamours, and it becomes clear that it's Draco and Harry. And Draco's like, wow, you better walk out of here. And instead, Harry fucks him. So they fuck, and then Draco is very, he's a submissive through and through in this book. So that's what, Draco is into. He's a single father. He has a very young Scorpius. He's only 6 months old. And Harry wants to see him again because they have amazing encounter together. And Draco's like, that's going to be super complicated, but if you want to see me again, I go to this club called, I can't remember what the club's called. I think it's called Dying Gods or something, Burning Gods, I can't remember. And so Harry goes, and he sees Draco doing a performance. They're doing a Sharabi demonstration. I can't remember, but I think it's a Sharabi demonstration. And Draco has a long time dom, but he is his dom only in the club. Well, not only in the club, but they see other people. They're polygamous dom and sub, and the dom actually has multiple. So it's a whole thing. So this one is heavily in the BDSM world. That's my point. It is heavily. Harry has never been in that world before, so he's very interested in getting to know Draco more. And so Draco encourages him to check out there's a Dom Academy at this club, so he can learn more about becoming a safe and sane Dom, And there are a lot of secrets and a lot of things that happen. This is a very long one. I think this one was over 700 pages. And there was a lot of things that I loved. So I'm going to do a little bit of spoilers. But first, I loved Harry and Draco's relationship. There are a lot of secrets that are getting revealed. There are a lot of flashbacks because in the beginning, we believe that Draco was married to Astoria Greengrass. They were together. Even though Draco is gay, they were kind of together as like a cover. And then they did have a child together, and she died soon after Scorpius was born. And so Draco is a single, like, widowed father in the eyes of the wizarding world. And keep in mind, it's that in the eyes of the wizarding world type of thing, right? But Draco isn't expecting this thing with Harry to be long-term, and Harry, every move that he's making is making it clear that he wants to be with Draco long-term. So when, you know, as they get more serious and people more are, like, finding out about them, like, things become quite dangerous for Harry, and Draco may not be willing to risk his son's life to be with Harry. So there's that. So I was really enjoying that. I loved so much of this. I was already telling my friends to read it, my friends who I share fic with. And then at 80%, some things came out that this was an MPreg universe. Okay. So men can have babies in this one. Now, I'm not shaming anyone who likes to read those. I know that is, plenty of people love reading those. I do not like being surprised with that. And I did not see that in the tags for this at all. And I could have missed it maybe because there was like 100 tags in there. There is a sequel to this where it straight up says, like, this is an MPreg fic. But it was not quickly visible in this one because it is like a twist. Like, that's the twist. It's a surprise. And I deeply loved Harry and Draco by this point, but I'm not comfortable reading that. Like, I don't want to read it. It's not a fantasy for me. It's not fun. It was a bit too much for me. So by the time I was finishing this book, even though I love these two so much, I didn't want to go to that level of a story for me. So this one ended up being a 3.5. It's more of a thing of just like, you know, it's why there's trigger warnings. It's why there's tags, because there are just certain things that I don't find sexy in my romance, and I don't find attractive, and I don't find MPreg sexy to me when it's a surprise. Like, if I went into one knowing that that's what I was getting, that's a different thing when I know it's going to be there than when it's like, oh, surprise, Draco had a baby in this. And I'm like, don't like that. So there was also trigger warnings for trauma. Draco was very mistreated during the reign of Voldemort in this one. And he was previously assaulted. And so there's a lot of violence in this as well because of the situations they get put in and mental health issues. So there's a lot. This was, the thing I will say though, this was a very well-written fic. And if you don't mind those elements that I mentioned, this was a beautiful relationship between Draco and Harry. Like, Harry is so swoony. He's really swoony. Draco is very feminine and sweet and a very good father in this. So there are a lot of things to love. This is just not my kink. This was not my fun, and it wasn't what I signed up for. Did I download the second one because I fucking love these characters? I did, but I don't know that I'll read it because the more time I have away from it, the more I don't want there to be more of it. So that was a 3.5, and it was a 5 on the spice rating because there was 3 sums and 2 sums, and there's a lot of partner sharing because they are polygamous for a lot of this. They're allowed to sleep with who they want to, and I don't know, for me, like, it's set up from the beginning, so none of it's ever cheating to me because literally from day one, like, Harry knows that Draco has a dom that he sees, and Harry's really into that. And as they get closer and closer together, they don't really play as much with other people, but it's still a possibility. So then I read The Cowboy's Forbidden Crush by Deborah Garland. This book was on my TBR for April, and it was a quickie, so I actually just read it the other day. This was a cowboy romance. This was an age gap professor-student, but she's no longer his student. Because she was going to veterinary school, and when she graduates, she gives him her phone number because she knows he's been eyeing her and she's interested in him. And then they have like a one night thing together because she's going to be like moving to get an internship, and they're getting all of their like kicks out with each other. Well, it turns out she doesn't get the internship. She ends up having to switch where she gets an internship, and the place that she gets it is a place where he works. So now they are back in an inappropriate dynamic, but now they've had a taste of each other and they don't want to stop. This was poorly written. It was kind of a disaster for me. So this was a 2.5 star. It was a 3 on the spice scale. I wanted to love it so much, but like, you guys know when I say that the writing is poor, it's pretty poor because I generally don't notice. So there's that. And then the last book that I read, I know this one's kind of quick. I read a lot of really short books this month. Well, I mean, the fanfics were long, but like the other books were pretty short, or they were like bundled. But I read Kink Camp Hunted by A. Anders, and this is going to be the first in a Kink Camp series. So that's why I like this. Kink Camp, and this one is called Hunted. And so this is this magical place that is a kink camp where anything you want goes. It's safe, sane, and consensual. You can put out ads looking for a play partner. So in this coffee shop at the camp, you can put like an advertisement asking for, let's say you're looking for a little that you can spoil for the weekend, and then someone can answer it, right? And you would turn in like all of your hard limits and all of your things, and then you'd have a play date, right? And at the beginning of this one, we have our heroine Grace, who is actually like working at the camp a little bit. Her friend works there, and so she will like come and like help out at like the coffee shop. She helps out or whatever, and she's interested in some of the kinks, but she's still kind of working her way up to it. And one morning at the coffee shop, there is an ad up on the wall that's asking for someone to want to be hunted. No names will be shared. He doesn't even want to talk. They just want to have a real animalistic experience out in the woods. And Grace is very interested in this. And so her friend is like, do you want to do it? Because her friend, like, they know who the person is who put the ad up, but they're not going to out that person because it's supposed to be anonymous, but she knows it would be a good time, this person, for her to do it with. So she does. She fills out her info and puts in what her safe word is, and so then she shares it. And then there's like a designated place to do like the primal hunts. And so people know that like, oh, there's a hunt going on here for the next like hour or whatever, so we have to stay out of here. So it's kind of cool. Like, you're renting a space to have your primal hunt, right? So she goes wandering through the woods, and she's like, is anybody here? And then she can hear him, and then he like grabs her and asks like, what's your safe word? They do that, and then they go and they have the scene, and then it's over, and he only wanted a one-time thing, but she wants to do it again. So this was a little like 200-page, it was a novella or like short length. I'd really been looking forward to this. This one had Leave is the name of our hero. We don't get his POV for quite a bit, but he actually is the person who started the kink camp, and now he's kind of like the maintenance guy, and he's called, what is he called? I can't remember his name. They have like a nickname for him. But he doesn't play very often because he's actually a widower. He lost his wife a few years ago, so he doesn't play too often, but he did this time, and they were very into it. So yeah, this one had, this was BDSM, obviously this was kinky. What I loved about it, what I really loved, is that I love primal kink. I really do. I just love the animalistic thing about it, but so often it's not a consensual one, which I'm okay reading it non-consensually. You guys know I don't mind dubious consent or non-consent. But usually when I read primal kink, it's because it's like a stalker romance or a psychopath or a serial killer, so that's that primal thing. Like, they're literally hunting the person to kill them. And I've only read a few where the primal kink like is consensual. There was actually one by Rena Kent. I think it was Blackthorns. I don't know, where like that one is like dubious consent, but it becomes consensual because they like doing it so much. But then there was The Four Leaf, which I recently read, which was a novella that was a friends to lovers with primal kink. But I just haven't read a lot of them. And so I loved that this one was a completely consensual encounter, and they just did like consensual non-consent because she like fights him like she's trying to get away, and I love that stuff. The thing is that the story outside of the sex was just like very slow to progress and kind of didn't like vibe with me. And I can tell too, like I can tell the author's trying to introduce the camp at the same time. You know, we're starting to get a lay of like what things happen there, and you know, I believe this series is we're gonna meet those people, and some of that was just a little bit clunky for me, but I still had a great time and I was so happy to read it. So this one was 4 stars for me, and it was a 4 on the spice scale. And then yeah, the trigger warning's like it's CNC. This one's completely consensual. There's a little bit of grief, like the hero's grieving a little bit, but otherwise this one was just fun. So if you want to check out like a primal kink, I think this is a great one to start. It isn't dark. It was just kind of like, you know, it had like fun contemporary vibes, but they're at a kinky camp. So it wasn't dark. There isn't leather straps. There isn't all these things. Like it's kept very light. You know, it's literally this completely safe place where all of these kinky adults can just go to have fun with each other. So it was a great time. So there we go. That's the shortest wrap-up Jen's done in a while, but that was my week 13. So again, thank you so much to the new channel members. It means so much to me. Next week is my 4-year BookTube anniversary. I'm actually just about to film the Q&A that I was getting set up, and I'm very excited to dive into those questions and everything. But thank you guys for always making my time on BookTube so special. It means so much to me. So I'll see you next time, and have a great day.